piece by piece, brick by brick, statue by statue, starting with our own house, the People's House, the nation's Capitol building. And I yield again to my colleague.
Madam President.
The Senator from New Jersey.
Thank you very much, Madam President. As if in legislative session, I ask unanimous consent the Rules Committee be discharged from further consideration of S 3957 and the Senate proceed to its immediate consideration. I further ask that the bill be read a third time and passed, and the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table, with no intervening action or debate.
Is there objection?
Madam Chair,
The Senator from Missouri.
Reserving the right to object, let me say we just got this bill assigned to the Rules Committee. It would have the effect of abandoning agreements that we have entered into with the states and the states have entered into with us. I'd certainly like to have some time to decide if we should have a hearing on this. I'd like to get the opinion of people who are taking similar statues out of the building. I'd also like to find out what other states have in mind as their part of this agreement. The Democratic leader just said states and localities are removing these statues. Each of these states would have the right to remove this statue, and some are. This is an agreement with the states that goes back to 1864. By 1933, Statuary Hall was full, and the Congress again authorized this program by saying these statues could be placed in the Capitol. It took until about 2000 until there were 100 statues from the states. States are limited to 2 from each state, and 50 states, there were 100 statues by 2000. At that point, the Congress passed another law providing a way that the states for the first time could take a statue out. And even in 2000, no suggestion then or before then that the Congress would decide whether the statue that the state wanted to put in could be put into the building. Matter of fact, Madam President, your state, Nebraska, just recently replaced William Jennings Bryan with Chief Standing Bearer under the provisions made to do that. The Congress has been very prescriptive in how this happened. The state would have to pass legislation. The governor would have to sign it to put a statue in the building. The Congress would only determine if the statue met the requirements that the other statues had been held to. And up until now, that's been the congressional part of this agreement with the states. To take a statue out of the collection and replace it with another one. My state, Missouri, is replacing Thomas Hart Benton with Harry Truman. The legislature had to agree. They had to agree what statue would go out, what statue would come in, and the Congress would then accept that statue if it met the standards. Now, we can do away with that program. We could do a lot of things, but we've entered into that agreement. The forts, as an example, and again, the minority leader mentioned the forts. The forts are named totally by the Congress. And I expressed my belief this week that it would be absolutely, and last week, that it would be absolutely appropriate, in my view, to review the names of the forts have been named after, including the forts that are named after Confederate military leaders, and to change those names. And we can do that all on our own. We haven't told North Carolina that a fort has to be named after General Bragg. We haven't told Texas that a fort has to be named after Confederate General Hood. We can change those. I'm very open to us looking at that and likely doing that. I just think, for my friend from New Jersey, that this is a more complicated arrangement than activity on the floor today would suggest. I'd also point out that since in 2000 the Congress said you can replace statues with another statue, You have to take a statue out to put a statue in, but you can replace statues. 8 of those statues have already been replaced. 8 more are in the process of being replaced. And I think 4 or 5 of the statues that have been replaced or would be replaced were in the standard of the Confederate statues. I'm encouraged that states are looking at their history, that they're looking at who has come since they put those statues in. Arkansas replaced Uriah Milton Rose, a Confederate statue, with Daisy Gadsden Bates, a civil rights leader. Florida replaced Edmund Kirby Smith with Mary McLeod Bethune, an educator, a presidential advisor, and civil rights leader. Arkansas is in the process of replacing one of these statues. I think that today's action would violate our agreements with the states. I frankly think my friend from New Jersey encouraging the governors, encouraging the speakers of the House to do what they have every right, and the Congress, in fact, in 2000 gave them the right to do. The minority leader was the chairman of the committee that determines all of this just a handful of years ago, and took no actions to do what the Congress, the Senate's talking about doing today. And so with that in mind, Madam President, I object.
Objection is heard.
Madam President, if I just may respond, I know how busy my colleague is, and he has a well-earned reputation on both sides of this body for his sincerity, for his decency, and for his honor. And I take his words to heart, that this is often not a good forum to try to push a piece of legislation that might have controversy on both sides. I understand his sincere concerns with that. And I guess you also understand the sincerity with which I bring this up, the hurt, the pain that these statues represent in a place where millions of Americans come to the Capitol and see this as their body. And because you said there are complications in this, and that there are issues that we would have to work through as a Senate, I guess the one last appeal to your more senior status and maybe your friendship is, would you join me at least on a letter to the appropriate committee asking them to at least have a hearing on this issue so that we could have a full vetting of all the complexities and have a real discussion on something that is a pressing concern. And I note that you know it's a pressing concern because some states are already taking action. You see this action being taken across different various points of our country. You see this issue being pushed into the national consciousness. You see Republicans and Democrats, from Nikki Haley to my dear friend who is the mayor Landrieu of New Orleans. I think it would be just and right that perhaps you and I, as a show of bipartisan concern and sincere awareness of the complexity of these issues, could just join the two of us on a letter asking the committee to take up this issue in due time so that we can have an appropriate discussion from all perspectives on this issue.
Well, as I said, if I could have the chance to respond here.
Yeah, of course.
This bill was just assigned to our committee. This is a discussion that I guess appropriately we might have had before I was asked to come to the floor to exert the rights of the committee to have the opportunity to think about that. I don't know that I want to negotiate that right here, but as I said, and my friend heard just a moment ago, I'd like to hear have the states that are replacing statues. I'd like to hear the states that are thinking about replacing statues. Is this a problem in the process of, under the current structure, solving itself? But I'm glad to have continued discussions about this, and I certainly don't impugn my friend's motives. You know, you can question somebody's decision to maybe bring a bill this quickly to the floor without giving us a chance to talk about it, but I have no interest in impugning my friend's motives and understand some of the concerns my friend would have on this topic.
Thank you, sir. It's generous of you, if I may. I will make the personal appeal then individually for a hearing on these matters. I hope that we can do that in due time. I know the pace at which the Senate often works, but I am grateful for this dialogue, this open dialogue that you've been willing to do, and I know that you had to adjust your schedule, so I'm grateful for your kindness and generosity, sir. Thank you.